Hi friends, Mindy here. Welcome back to another Word Study Wednesday. I'm once again working in my word study journal from the James Method. And today, again, I'm doing a word that was requested by one of my viewers. And this word is grace. So if you type grace into your app or your Blue Letter Bible app, for instance, it's going to show you 159 times that this word is used in the Bible. I'm going to be focusing on the New Testament, and even then, it's translated over 140 times. And so, I kind of had to just pick some verses. The suggestion was just for the word and not a very specific verse. And so I'm going to be focusing on Romans 5:2, which says, "By whom also we have access by faith into this grace wherein we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God." So the Strong's number for this particular word, grace, is G5485. And it comes from the root word of G5463. So I'm writing out this definition, and it is a little bit lengthy, but it's the definition, according to Strong's anyway, is graciousness of manner or act, especially the divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in the life, acceptable, benefit, favor, gift, grace, joy, liberality, pleasure, thankworthy. It is a noun. I'm writing all of those kinds of things over in the parsing of this word. And I wrote down that's in accusative sense because it means, which means that it's basically like the direct object. So this is something that is basically given to you. And so, or done to in terms of like sentence structure. The root word of this is actually a verb. And it is used oftentimes. You'll see it in letters in the greeting, like grace be to, grace to you, and all those kinds of, in those letters in the New Testament. That's where you'll see this word a lot as a greeting. But we are focusing on G5485. In this sense, this word is a noun. And another thing that I did write out was the way that this word is actually used throughout the New Testament. So I did write down the notes for usage. I wrote these on some translucent sticky notes or transparent sticky notes from Mr. Penn. And the first definition is grace, and says that which affords joy, pleasure, delight, sweetness, charm, loveliness, grace of speech, goodwill, loving kindness, favor, the merciful kindness by which God, exerting his holy influence upon souls, turns them to Christ, keeps, strengthens, increases them in Christian faith and virtues. And it's what is due to grace is the spiritual condition of one governed by the power of divine grace, the token or proof of grace, benefit, a gift of grace, thanks, recompense, reward. So in this New Testament, it's translated as grace 130 times. It's also translated as a favor or thanks or pleasure, and then miscellaneous 7 times. Everywhere from Luke to Jude, this word is used. The most that it shows up is in Romans. And so that's the verse that I pulled, was from Romans 5:2. And I did go ahead and get some of the lexicon as well for the Hebrew, which has a couple of noun versions and also a verb version. And those are H2580, H5034, and H8467. And you can go in and actually search those numbers, the Strong's numbers, and you can actually get some more information. So that's kind of what I am doing over here. I want to go through and write the usage. There's a couple different areas in the Blue Letter Bible app that you can do this. I was just kind of going through and counting, but if you go to the actual website version, there's a section that will list them all out, and so you can count them, so you don't have to, this word is translated over 150 times, so you don't have to sit there and count them all. But anyway, over to the notes and nuggets section. The first area that I'm going to do is in Luke 1:30. And what I did is I chose to write down some of the translations where this root word, G5485, is actually translated in other ways than grace, just to kind of give the idea. So Luke 1:30 says, "And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God." So that's one way that this word is translated, favor. Luke 6:32 says, "For if you love them which you love you, what thank have ye? For sinners also love them that love them." And so this is the word thank here is translated grace. And so I did go in and write some notes and kind of did this a little bit differently. Instead of doing my main takeaway, I kind of wrote some notes as I was going through. So the main implication here in this Luke 6 verse is that even non-Christians or anyone really, it's normal to only love those people who love you. I'll love you if you love me back. But the grace of God means loving those who don't love you, who don't deserve it, just as Jesus gave his life for all, not only the few who believed in him or the few who he deemed worthy to make that sacrifice for. And that should be how we operate as well. So John 1:17 says, "For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ." And again, I wrote here a note that the law was weak and that they only dealt with the action of sin, and it was just a perpetual cycle. They would sin, they would do an offering. But Jesus came to eliminate that cycle by offering grace. And it's really undeserving, as we are all sinners. But through his sacrifice, we are all saved. And so these are just kind of the notes that were coming to me, or the thoughts that were coming to me as I was writing out these verses. So again, instead of writing these down in the main takeaway, I'm just popping them up into the notes after the verses there. And you can see I have my little sticky notes over there. I'm going to actually include that verse in Romans 8:3-4, which says that for what the law could not do, in that it was weak, through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. So that is in reference to that John 1:17 situation. In Romans 5:17, a little further down in Romans, it says, "For if by one man's offense death reigned by one, much more they that which receive the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness shall reign in life by one, Jesus Christ." And then I wrote down here also to see verses 20 and 21, because they also are kind of in the context. I think anytime you kind of are writing these verses out, it's really good to go through and read them in context so that you really understand what is happening with these verses, instead of just kind of taking and plucking out, well, this is the same word, but understanding how they really sort of all work together. So again, I kind of have my takeaways from these ideas written up with the verses. And so for my main takeaway section, I'm actually just going to write out a part of a commentary. And here you can see I'm writing out that section in Romans because I really want to place that note with that verse from John 1:17, because it's talking about the law given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. And the law was weak. It was not sufficient to do what it needed to do for us. That was what we needed Jesus for. And so through that, we have the abundance of grace, as is mentioned later in Romans 5:17. So that's what you see me writing out here. I started out writing, I thought I was just going to write one verse. And then again, as I was reading in context, I'm like, oh, let me add that second verse. So I started out writing just Romans 8:3, and then I needed to tuck verse 4 in there. So I'm trying to squeeze it onto my little sticky note here. So my handwriting gets a lot smaller toward the end of this little sticky note, but that's okay. So, again, for the main takeaway that I actually wrote down, this is part of a commentary. I guess actually I'm coming back over for a second to the lexicon. This is where I wrote the Hebrew equivalents. And I always go to the Blue Letter Bible website for this information. So, but I do all of that on my iPad, but usually most of what I need, I can access through the app. I will say, if you have not used Blue Letter Bible, I have a video in this playlist for Word Study Wednesday that will kind of walk you through the app version of this word. And then I'm just making a note about the root word as well, which is that it's used in letters as greeting, because you'll see that a lot in the New Testament. And then I'm going to come back over now to my main takeaway. Sorry, I know that I jump back and forth, but it's just, I can't help it. So anyway, but what I wrote down is that this is a further privilege, not only peace, but grace that is in this favor. That's from Matthew Henry. And he also says that by Christ as the author and principal agent, by faith as the means of this access, not in excuse me, I can't read my own handwriting, not in consideration of any merit of ours, because we don't have any, but our believing dependence upon him and resignation of ourselves to him. And I love how that is worded, that our believing dependence upon him and that in our resignation of ourselves. And I think that really just kind of has to be the posture of our heart, because we don't deserve this grace that we have. And so it's important to continually, perpetually remember that. So if you liked this video, I hope that you would give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Consider joining my Facebook group. I'll have all that information in the description. And if there is a word that you would like to see in future Word Study Wednesdays, drop that in the comments. And until next time, bye.